Hello everybody, thanks ever so much for tuning in to the weekly vlog. It does feel like it's a time of intense change and discord in the world, doesn't it? And of course there are big changes afoot in the health service as well, and I was going to talk about some of those changes in this vlog. But before I do, a little bit closer to home, just to acknowledge the reality of the uncertainty and the difficulty, particularly in North Lincolnshire, as we see unfolding events around the steelworks in Scunthorpe. It's not entirely clear at the moment exactly what will happen, but the sense is that what will happen is going to happen with remarkable pace. The Trust is very engaged with the local authority in preparing for potential eventualities, and I'll say more about that, I guess, in the weeks ahead. But for now, I just want to acknowledge that there'll be people who work in our organisation who have family connections or local connections into the steelworks, and that sense of uncertainty, of anger and of fear will be palpable. Vicky Clare in the North Links adult care group and Roberta Radcliffe Burns in the children's care group are working with myself and others on our response. And I'm sure if, as a line manager, you need support in supporting people who are in this situation inside Ardash, that they would be good people to talk to as well as to those involved in our health and well-being offer more generally. At a time of such change, I think it is helpful sometimes to go back to some fundamentals in the care that we provide. Not that those things can always trade off against the difficulties, but it does keep you grounded and rooted. I was really encouraged over the last few days to read through the results of the Community Mental Health Survey for our organisation. Nearly 250 people contributed to the CQC national survey, which I think had about 14,000 responses. There's a link on the screen as I'm talking, but the organisation for 2024-25 had results that were very much better than expected in the jargon of the Care Quality Commission. Now, as ever, there's a lot of detail in the actual report, and we need to pay attention to the things that didn't work for our patients as much as the things that did. But really encouraging results, perhaps particularly around people's experience of having medication delivered and explained to them, and also their sense of involvement in care planning. So thank you to everybody who works in our community mental health teams, both for kids, for working age adults and for older adults, where we've got results from that survey. And do take a look at the feedback on the work that we're able to do. I was also encouraged to find that as an organisation, we have been awarded the tender or the hosting arrangement for the Ethnic Minority Research Inclusion Network across Yorkshire and the wider area. Again, a tribute to a traditional strength of our organisation in the research excellence that I've spoken about in recent weeks, but also our commitment to inclusion with our Promise 26 and our Promise 28. So I feel like Heather and Mike Senevaratne and others are building on strengths that the organisation has always had. And I'm sure if you're at that research conference in a couple of weeks' time, there'll be more to say and more to reflect on the opportunities that hosting arrangement presents. There's a huge amount going on too in preparing for the new public service year. I've said before that a lot of that for our organisation is about continuity, even as national targets change and plans come out from the centre. In many ways, we need to keep doing what we've been doing over the last 18 months, 2 years, and try and deliver. And I spoke last week about a couple of the promises that are at the forefront of that endeavour. But you'll be aware that NHS England will be closing, subject to a vote of Parliament. And over the next couple of years, there will be a merger of NHS England with the Department of Health. Both organisations have new leadership now in place. And there were big changes too for integrated care boards that we work alongside, that commission our services and that we work with. So at a human level, a time, again, of enormous change for people who work in those organisations, and a real need for us to lean in to those changes and work with valued colleagues, but also to recognise that it looks like NHS trusts will be asked to take on rather more responsibility, both for community development and for reshaping pathways along Aradazi's 3 shifts, hospital to community, analog to digital, and so on. So there are opportunities for the organisation, and again, I think they tap in to what we've been doing over the recent past. But there were some really difficult messages, aren't there, in those NHS England changes. It brings front and centre the financial challenge that health service will face in coming years. We've probably got the money that we're going to have, and my old phrase of needing to recycle the money that we have to get the most from it, I think now applies on a national scale. There's some understandable but occasionally poorly chosen messaging, I think, about nationally to colleagues who work not in patient-facing areas, as we would think of it, backbone functions, sometimes called back office functions. Now, over the last couple of years in an organisation, there's been an awful lot of reshaping of those functions as we've tried to spend more of every pound on patient care. But I want colleagues who work in those functions to hear that the local message is clear about how valued and significant you are to the care that we provide. We've been investing for the coming year in more clinical administration to support senior clinical professionals with great quality administration. And I do feel that after the changes we've made in the last couple of years, we are well ahead of the pack in what we're being asked to do to reduce what's called the corporate overhead. So I can't take away anxieties that people will feel. I'm encouraging managers and leaders to talk within their teams, even where, or perhaps especially where, there's a lack of certainty. There isn't a simple message to deliver. There are possibilities and emerging themes. But if you are in any way concerned, do reach out to Carleen Holden, to myself, but particularly to your line manager, to just create space to explore those issues and those changes. As I say, many of the changes in ICBs, but there will be changes too for providers in our organisation. Now, next week, of course, Learning Half Day. Looks like there might be some sunshine. There are all sorts of things you could do with your Learning Half Day, but please, as I said, I think last week and maybe even the week before, do make a little bit of time in there to do the tens of minutes, half an hour or so of radar training that we need you to do. Radar, as you will remember, is the replacement for Ulysses, but much more importantly, it's going to be the repository for a lot of our data about incidents, about patient harms, about risks, and about clinical and professional guidelines. So it's going to be really important. It isn't Starlink, it's radar. So really engage with it, do the training, and I think it's going to be a real asset to our organisation as we focus on safety and we focus on the quality of care we're able to provide over the coming year. So a mix of a message for this Friday. Got to be honest, there's some really positive things going on. There's some real anxiety and difficulty both in our local communities and in the NHS. And I suppose with that mix comes a real ask on leaders to make sure that we're creating the time to talk and the time to think. Thanks ever so much for tuning in. If there's something you want me to talk about that I'll never get into, do let me know. But you have a decent time over the weekend, whether you're working or resting. Thanks a lot.